Dmitry, thanks so much for your time. Now, there are concerns that the situation on the border will be a military escalation. Russia, of course, has sent troops there and is providing military support to Belarus. But if the situation does become worse and there's actual violence, why would Moscow want to now risk military action?
Well, let me make a small correction. Russia did not send troops to Belarus. Russia sent troops to the border with Ukraine for a very different reason. As for Belarus, I think it's a very unfortunate situation in which Russia plays absolutely no role. The problem is that both the EU and the Belarusian leader, Alexander Lukashenko, they just don't want to hear each other. The EU imposed sanctions. Let me remind you that for 7 years, Russia was under sanctions and Mr. Lukashenko was not under sanctions because the EU wanted to make him an enemy of Russia, an enemy of Mr. Putin. The EU supported the independence of Belarus against Russia. Now that the EU quarreled with Lukashenko, the EU just refuses any kind of dialogue. And Lukashenko used this migrant crisis as a retaliation for the sanctions imposed on his country. There are some signs of hope lately. Mrs. Merkel talked to Lukashenko on the phone. I think that was a very good, brave decision on her side. Of course, it won't mean that Lukashenko will get what he wants. He will not get the relief of sanctions. But at least dialogue has started. And I think on both sides of the border, in Russia, in the EU, in Poland, in Belarus, there is a desire to resolve this issue. I'm pretty sure that this migrant crisis will be resolved, and the migrants will not stay in Poland. That's for sure.
Well, I mean, Dmitry, this, of course, is a situation that everybody wants resolved because there are human lives at risk here. Then many have said that Lukashenko is using this as they're weaponizing the migrant crisis. But I just want to point out that many analysts really do believe that Russia is very much involved. Russian jets flying over Belarus, I believe, on the 10th of November, and this all coming from international media. And Moscow has long supported Belarus. They've long supported Lukashenko's government, one of their strongest allies here. How does Russia then backtrack from what is evident on the ground?
Well, first, we have a union state with Belarus. So Russian troops are not occupying Belarus. There are joint military exercises, but Belarus is a sovereign country. Lukashenko made his sovereign decision to allow these migrants into Belarus. It was his personal revenge against the EU for imposing sanctions on the Belarusian enterprises. And as for the migrants, I think the role of the West and of the EU in this crisis is much greater than Russia. Let me remind you that these people came from Iraq. Iraq was destroyed not by Russia. Iraq was destroyed by the American and British occupation. So it's very unfortunate that the West, including Poland, doesn't want to notice that it has a certain fault in this situation also. These people came from a supposedly democratic country, Iraq, from a supposedly democratized country, Afghanistan, and the West just want to talk about it. As for the friendship between Russia and Belarus...
Dmitry, sorry to interrupt you. We just are running out of time. But many of those migrants are coming from countries that you say are democratic, but are incredibly unstable at the moment. Of course, I mean, the Taliban staging practically a coup in Afghanistan. Syria is still at war. Yemen, there's a long-going civil war there. So many people, those migrants, would say that they're not coming from stable governments and they're trying to reach better lives. I just want to move on very quickly to the buildup of Russian troops on that border with Ukraine. Some analysts saying that this is the migrant crisis is being used as a deflection for what's happening on that border with Ukraine.
It was not Russia that made these countries unstable. It was the United States and the other Western countries that made Afghanistan and Iraq and Yemen unstable. The United States occupied Afghanistan. It occupied Iraq. It promised to make these countries stable and democratic. It failed. And now people are fleeing from there. So this is the real root of the problem. As for the friendship between Russia and Belarus, it was a very recent phenomenon. And it happened because there was an attempt by the Western-supported forces in Belarus to seize power in 2020, last year. There was an election which could be disputed. I don't think Mr. Lukashenko is a Democrat, and he was very much criticized in Russia. That's why we had bad relations for many years. You know, Russia has been criticizing Lukashenko for a lot of things. But the problem right now is the intransigence, you know, the very tough intransigent approaches, both on the side of Belarus and on the side of the European Union. As I said, there was just one attempt to have a compromise. It came from Mrs. Merkel, but Mrs. Merkel is leaving. So I don't think Lukashenko should congratulate himself too much on this call that he got from her last night.
Well, I'm very much hoping that this migrant crisis will be solved very soon. Dmitry Babich, really appreciate your perspective speaking to us there from Moscow. Thank you very much.